No matter where a player learned the game, he had to start with a pair of skates, a stick, and a puck. But equipment has changed over the years, and those innovations have allowed hockey to evolve into the faster, more precise game we know today. But innovations are not limited to equipment. The game itself evolves, and those who affect the most change wind up in the Hall of Fame. They are hockey's pioneers, like Bobby Orr, the legendary Boston Bruin defenseman who changed the way his position was played.
Throughout his 10 seasons with the Boston Bruins in the late 1960s and early 70s, Bobby Orr, the prodigy from Parry Sound, Ontario, was a true hockey revolutionary. He was the first defensive player in the history of the game to focus on offense.
Here's Bobby Orr going in, backhander.
Orr broke the mold of the typical hockey defenseman by inventing a new and electrifying style that forever changed the way the game was played.
Bobby Orr reinvented the position of defense. Before Bobby Orr, defensemen rarely lugged the puck anywhere.
Breaks, he's over the line.
When Orr got the puck, he brought it out himself.
Behind the net, how's it?
From the defense position, Bobby had the ability to manipulate the game. But he did it in such a fun, exciting, determined, talented way.
I played a style that wasn't a style that many players played. Coaches didn't like it. Teams didn't like it. If they'd asked me to sit back and not skate with the puck, I don't think I would have been nearly as effective.
Orr's flashy offensive style turned hockey upside down. He was the first defenseman to win the league's scoring title, a remarkable achievement he accomplished twice. He was always attacking, never retreating.
It looks like a stampede coming at you.
Bobby Orr, one of the game's great skaters. Look at him fly.
And you start to feel yourself backpedaling, and backpedaling more furiously.
Picks up speed.
You breathe more quickly.
Here he comes.
And then, who knows what was going to happen out of all of that, but you knew something was.
Orr holds, spins away from McGregor to Busick, and he scores!
Before Orr's arrival in 1966, Boston had spent many seasons in the league's basement. The Bruins, in fact, had last won the Stanley Cup in 1941, and by the 60s, their fans were clamoring for something to happen. And that something was Orr, at the time a 14-year-old hockey prodigy, playing for Boston's top minor league club.
Bobby Orr was indentured when he was 12 years old, and people had gotten word that the Messiah was coming. Scouts, writers, people whispered, there's a Messiah coming.
So that's all they had to talk about, is when is the kid coming? When is the kid coming? And thank God when he finally showed up, he was great.
When the kid finally did arrive, he won the Calder Trophy as the league's best rookie. And then, in his second season, Orr and the Bruins came together as a team and made the playoffs for the first time since 1958.
He turned the losing team primarily by himself into a winning team.
He scores for the goal!
2 seasons after that, Boston swept past the Chicago Blackhawks in the 1970 Stanley Cup semifinals.
The Bruins move into the Stanley Cup Finals.
Now all that stood between Orr's Bruins and the Stanley Cup were the St. Louis Blues, an expansion team playing in its 3rd year in the league. The heavily favored Bruins won the first 3 games of the best-of-7 series and returned to Boston for Game 4. The stage was set, but would the Messiah deliver?
We go out thinking Stanley Cup, and St. Louis is not quitting. St. Louis is not rolling over.
With the game tied at 3, the teams headed into overtime, with Orr hoping to head into hockey history.
We obviously wanted to finish it there at home in front of our fans. It had been 29 years since they had seen the Stanley Cup, so they were very excited.
Westfall rolled it in front. Sanderson tried a shot that was wide.
The puck was coming up, and I went in to try to keep it in, and it hit me, and I knocked it back in the corner.
Bobby kept it in, and then he just headed for the net, and Derek just timed it perfectly.
Bobby Orr behind the net to Sanderson. Orr! Bobby Orr scores in the Boston Bruins have won the Stanley Cup.
It was just so dramatic in terms of flying through the air.
Bobby went flying through the air like he was Superman, and I think he felt like Superman at that point.
It was something I'd dreamt about so much as a kid, and now I'm part of the best team in the world. It was wonderful.
There they go, the Boston Bruins skating off with the Stanley Cup.
You ask anyone over the age of 40 in New England where they were when Bobby Orr scored the goal, and they'll tell you.
You could hear everybody screaming on the block, and then, but everybody stayed inside to watch the post-game interviews.
The Stanley Cup. The Stanley Cup with Bobby Orr. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about.
And then we went out in the streets and played hockey and tried to recreate the goal.
There were many imitators, but nothing would ever come close to the original. A lasting image kept for all time with one click of the shutter.
Picture really made the goal and made it bigger than it probably would have been, because it's one of the great sports pictures of all time.
At the time he scored the goal to win the 1970 Stanley Cup, Bobby Orr was only 22. Little did he and the rest of us know there were dark days to come.
Stories from the Hall of Fame on the History Channel. It's rare when a young athlete delivers on his promise and potential, but that's what Bobby Orr did when he led his Boston Bruins to the 1970 Stanley Cup.
1970 was the culmination. They won again in 1972, beating the Rangers in the 6th game.
Orr's all-out, innovative style of play had brought Boston 2 cups, but it had also begun to take its toll on Bobby's knees, which began to fail him at an early age.
When you're carrying the puck as a defenseman and making the moves he made, he gets hit in the knee an awful lot.
3 years after winning his 2nd cup, a damaged and broken Orr left Boston and tried to revive his game with the Chicago Blackhawks.
We saw his greatness for such a short period of time. And it's sort of one of the tragedies of hockey. The fact of the matter is, many of those years, we only saw a shadow of what Bobby Orr was.
Finally, in 1978, no longer able to play to his accustomed high level on his injury-ravaged knees, Orr left the game almost as quickly as he came to it. He was just 30 years old.
It was very clear in my mind that there's just no way I could play anymore. To all of a sudden come to anybody that's played a sport and loved the sport or say, hey, you can't do it any longer, it's tough.
Like it had done just 7 times before, the Hockey Hall of Fame waived its customary 3-year waiting period and inducted Orr immediately after his retirement. It wasn't much of a stretch.
Seeing who had been waived previously, there was no way until somebody changed the rule on me that Bobby Orr would have to wait 3 years. He was that outstanding.
The Hall of Fame, it's quite a place, and the players that I'm there with, it's wonderful.
Bobby Orr was a 3-time most valuable player, and 8 times he was named the league's best defenseman. His career lasted slightly more than 10 seasons, but in that 1 decade, his style of play changed the game more than it had changed in the previous 50 years.